Welcome to the Property and Coffee Podcast. I'm Matt Atkinson.
I'm Matt Skehan.
We'll be fueling your financial future with one coffee and property insights at a time,
helping you navigate the property market like a pro.
As this is our debut podcast, we'll be doing a little bit of an introduction on us, your hosts, and also giving you a bit of a rundown as to what you can expect for this podcast and others in the future. So my name is Matthew Atkinson. I'm a finance broker and director at Condor Finance Partners. You can typically find me down in the southeast bay side of Melbourne, either spending some time with my young family or spending some time on the bay. When I'm not doing that, I'm helping our clients navigate the world of property finance. Favorite coffee, double shot latte from my local at Rustic Cafe in Parkdale. And I'll hand over to my co-host, Matt Skehan, to introduce himself. Let us know where he gets his local brew and also what our listeners can expect by tuning into our podcast. Matty, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Matt Skehan, Director of Azure Buyers Agent and a Buyers Agent. Beaumaris, Bayside local as well. Beaumaris is home. 2 school-aged children, mate. They keep me busy. We just got back from a little 5 nights in Bright, which is lovely. Love to keep active and fit. Everything that the beautiful Bayside has on offer, mate. In terms of coffee, love my coffee and a bit of a coffee snob, I think. Strong skinny latte man, and also a magic sort of these days I rotate from Two Monkeys in the concourse in Beaumaris. So really looking forward to this podcast, bringing this educational vibe, sort of advocating for our clients and what we're passionate about, finance and property, and obviously a bit of coffee, a bit of Melbourne flavour to it as well. So we're really excited for what we can share with our listeners.
Perfect. Matty, I also know Two Monkeys and Carmelo makes a good cup, and you've got high standards, so we know that would be a good one to check out. Just in terms of how the podcast is going to run, we'll run you through some order of events. First up, we're going to have a bit of a barbecue chat, just hearing around what people are hearing in their social circles and being talked about, in a sort of a more relaxed setting. Some news bites, what's happening in the world that might be impacting the property market, whether it be Australia or obviously for our focus is in Victoria. We'll have a featured segment where typically we'll have a guest come in with a different area of expertise just to share with us some of their value add. For today, Maddie, myself and you will be touching on some hot topics in the property markets, and then we'll just be wrapping up the podcast.
Looking forward to it, Maddie.
Perfect. So without wasting any more time, we're going to touch on a bit of barbecue chat. So Matty, the first one I'll kick off with, and obviously, we might be a little bit biased being down in Victoria. I feel like Victoria's been a bit of the black sheep amongst the states, especially in Australia over the last couple of years.
100%, Matty.
Are we seeing a resurgence, and is it the place to be?
Well, number plates used to say that, the place to be. But no, definitely on the advocacy front. And so my business is a bit over 3.5 years old. And I think for the first 3 years, no one wanted to really touch Victoria from various reasons, from the property taxes and just sentiment and COVID, the hangover as well. But it's definitely, this year really on the rise. So a combination of, as you know, a lot of migration into Melbourne, but affordability now. So a lot of the other capitals are more expensive than Melbourne. So that's, I think, really driving that demand, even from interstate investors as well. We're seeing the rise of advocates interstate buying even sort of sight unseen of videos and stuff like that as well, competing with the home buyers, with the stimuluses from the government as well. So it's sort of a little bit of building a bit of a perfect storm after 5 years in the sort of in the wilderness, really. So yeah.
No, it's fantastic to hear. And as I said, obviously being locals and really enjoying where we live, it's great to see or hear on the ground in terms of what people are talking about and the positivity that's surrounded like that, especially, as you said, after the pandemic. It's been a bit of a tough couple of years as there's been some volatility for a number of different reasons. So great place to be walking about and seeing everyone, a bit of confidence in their step, especially in our space. So look, let's hope that is something we continue to see in the foreseeable future.
I think it's good for
and obviously
good for us.
we take our place as a state back where it should be. Next, we're going to just touch on some of the news, some of the news bites that we're seeing in the week that's floating around, on your local publications and what people are speaking about. One of the big things that's been a talking point, obviously with the 1st of October rolling around, there's been a big change around the first home buy incentives and just different government guarantee schemes. So one thing I'd like to touch on is, we're seeing some change in government policy And, how's that coming through and impacting people that are looking to enter the market, but also, investor sentiments, and how's that impacting that?
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, Matty. So as you know, we're about to have the 5% for the first home buyers and an expanded scheme, but I think it's already increased some demand. So because people who have already been looking are aware that that's probably going to create a little bit more demand, which is obviously it's going to be harder for them as well. As I said, and then they're competing against the investors in that space as well. So I think we've noticed inquiry has increased, and even just the number of people at open homes and stuff on weekends is busier. I'm sure if you've been out and pounded the pavement, you're definitely going to be noticing more and more people out as well. So it's definitely sentiment was already on the rise with rates and a few other things, but I think it's throwing a bit of fuel on the fire. I think particularly in those affordable segments, which is really where it's leading from at the moment. So
no, that's perfect. And as you say, look, it's people want prices to rise. You want your demand to be going up, especially if you're a homeowner. But on the flip side, right, if you're looking to get into the market, it's a good, I suppose, you want to get into the market, take advantage if you can use some of those options for you.
Yeah, the first step's always the hardest, Matty, I think. So it's tough. So
that's it. And that probably leads me into the second point that we wanted to highlight, right? So obviously the government schemes potentially have a positive impact around for Australians and them entering the market. Also investors have, again, been a bit of a tough time. We've seen land tax thresholds and that change, vacant land tax as well. So they'll be having
a number of things been thrown at, sort of 4 or 5 things, they've been sort of, absolutely.
Well, that's it. So hopefully, again, a bit of a turning of the tide. But into the next point, we are still seeing, and this isn't maybe just a Victoria specific, call it issue, there's a bit of a supply crunch around properties that are available. But also, and we're seeing it down here, migration rates have increased, and Victoria especially has seen quite a few people come in, which again, people are coming in and they might be, impacting around or putting a bit of a strain on the supply side of things from a housing perspective. How are we seeing people, we're seeing that reflected around the demand, whether it be in rental or specifically around purchasing new properties?
Yep. Yeah, no, I think both sides. Obviously we had a bit of an exodus over the COVID years. We had an exodus in the rental market, sort of 20-30% depending on areas as well. So that's obviously, I know we've got some clients now who are nervous about sort of trying to navigate a new lease and then obviously then trying to buy as well. So I think there's definitely sort of a little bit of the conditions are sort of aren't quite favourable at the moment because of that. Migration. Melbourne is affordable. We've even sort of seen a bit of reverse migration occurring where everyone left in the doldrums through COVID into Queensland and stuff. So people are starting to even move back a little bit now as well because of that affordability thing for Melbourne as well. And I think the 4th most livable city in the world most recently we voted. So we're getting that vibe back. We just had the grand final and a few other events, and so Melbourne is still got a lot of the fundamentals. So yeah.
And it's as you pointed out, right? Footy finals or grand final on the weekend.
Probably a great time to be in Melbourne, mate. So
it feels like it's almost, I want to say the start of summer, but it feels like we're trending in the right direction.
Spring's in the air, it's getting lighter. Daylight savings is coming up. So yeah,
that's it. And a good time of year to take advantage of, and obviously see Melbourne in its full bloom. Do you feel we could probably run a whole separate episode on this, but there does seem to be a feeling that the government could be doing, and I'm going to focus maybe specifically on Victoria, just a little bit more around trying to open up areas where there's potential vacant tracts of land, and potentially let people build and develop areas where there currently is essentially it's just open tract. You drive sort of 40-50 minutes out the city, almost in any direction. You do suddenly hit a point where you get straight into farmlands. And not to say we should minimize our green spaces, but it does seem that on the fringes there's still a fair bit of tracts, different types of land that we could look to develop and take advantage of. Do you think there's a bit more that we could be doing as a state, maybe to make that more accessible when you consider the amount of or the influx of people coming in?
That's a good question, and probably try not to get into politics too much. But just again coming back from Bright, it was really obvious as you hit Wallen, and I suppose the outer skirts of almost Melbourne, and there's plenty of farmland, plenty of tracts of land out there, and frequent the southeast as well out that way. There's growth corridors, so I think there's definitely land. But I think also the other one as well is encouraging some infill development, some density, which is obviously the not in my backyard sort of school of thought, sort of because obviously Australia is and Melbourne is so spread out. So if we can get a bit more density, because even things like the suburban rail loop and things like that, for it to stack up, we need density, we need people, and so we can fund these infrastructure projects as well. So I think there's definitely needs to be a holistic view to fixing it. It's not a simple thing, right? Like there's sort of 800,000 houses that are to be built and in the target, but we're probably not on track at the moment. So it's creating further price pressures and supply and demand imbalances that are there for sure, Matty. Yeah.
No, perfect. Well, look, we might leave that then. As I said, might be something to explore in a different episode.
I think there's a bit to that.
There's a bit to unpack there. But the next part we're going to move on to is our featured guest segments. As I said, typically here we'll be getting someone in, but for today, myself and you, we're going to be diving into a bit of a conversation specifically around underquoting, around price. And just, one of the topics that's been in the news in my space maybe for the past 24 months, and we feel like Australians have paid closer attention to, it's just on the impact of interest rates and how that's changed and come down. So we are going to be diving into that shortly. And now we're going to touch into our guest segments. Typically, we're going to have someone come in where they're going to add some value based on their area of expertise. But Maddie, today, me and you, we're going to touch on some topics which are specific to the property market, and we see and get a fair bit of questions about, and just give some people an understanding of how to navigate them and move forward. So, underquoting and interest rates. I'm going to start with property underquoting on the price point. So, Matt, you do this every day of the week, 6 days a week when things are really absolutely cooking. So you would see a number of different properties and be trying to help your buyers understand, is the price what you're seeing, is it one appropriate for their budget, but also is it actually what the price will be by the time if you end up going to auction, or will they get blown out the water? So, from our side, what is the current, from our perspective, what's the current state of underquoting in the Melbourne markets? There's obviously been new laws coming in to try close up some of those loopholes, but what are you seeing on the ground and what's the sentiment out there?
Yeah, I think underquoting's been around for a long time, and I think there's obviously some tightening of the laws, but there's still some laxity there. So, for example, as an advocate, if you look at this statement of information, which is obviously meant to include 3 sales, those sales might not even reflect that property at all. They could be on a main road or in a different suburb. So I think there's some ways to get around being honest with the quote range as well. So, and that's what I spend a lot of time with my clients, because obviously I think people love that what if moments, like what if I win touch lotto? What if no one likes this property, and as well. But our job is really bringing, sort of trying to bring the facts and sort of educating our clients on sales results on a weekly basis, just so they've got an awareness of what's happening, and even just understanding some median data, just understanding the suburbs, and just I think the sold examples for me are the best ones, because obviously I think the buy tab sometimes is a bit, it seduces you, which on purpose, it's like, going to a shop and you see the price tag, 19.99 is $20, but it's obviously just attracts you to the eye as well. So I think that's just lifting the eyes a lot of the time for us to, as an advocate. Yeah.
And it's hard, right? For people buying property, sometimes they're only doing that a few times in their lifetime. It's a hugely emotional decision. Also comes with a reasonable price tag from a deposit and a debt perspective. So you want to make sure, or at least if you're going forward to an auction on someone's behalf, or they're going out on their own, that there's a realistic chance that they are aware of what that property should be priced at, regardless of what is maybe put on the price tag, whether that be online or what the agent is saying. So if you've got someone that's new to the market from a buyer's perspective, they're looking to go and purchase a property, what are some of the signs of underquoting or red flags that sort of spring to mind that you would say you want to be aware of? They pick up a property. What would you just be making sure that it's well priced within the range, or potentially where it might go for higher than expected because it is priced to sort of bring some of that popular
attractional, quote it low, watch it go type methodology. So I think the first one is just making sure they have an awareness of the market, and like in our process, education's a huge part of that first steps, that foundational knowledge. Because again, if you just trust, the sales agent, the quote, I think you're definitely going to get led down a garden path. And obviously for us, it's tapping into the agent connections and relationships as well. So pressure testing that sort of property as well. That's often what we do a lot of as well. We see a property in it and run it past another agent or two, with our connections and just sort of fact check it and pressure test it for ourselves as well. So I think and it is really hard for the average punter. So that's why I said we're probably seeing inquiry from people who are realizing that it is tough, because the sales agent works for the vendor. Their job is to get as many people through the door, create competitive tension. But and that's why, as I said, on our side, we there's a rise of the advocate, I suppose, these days, as people are time poor, busy, but also again they don't want to get building a pest. They add up, right, and going to auctions and you've got 5-6 bidders deep and you're not even in the hunt. So I think that's yeah.
And it can be really time consuming. Spending your weekends if you've missed out on a few, but as you said, going to auctions or attending them, and then also paying if you need to conduct the relevant inspections. That does add up. I mean, everyone's got a story where you've heard of someone that's been looking for a property for 2 or 3 years, in a specific suburb, but they've just, for whatever reason, just had some near misses, which...
Looking for the unicorn as well. I say sometimes, Matty, I said the unicorn, which doesn't sort of exist. That's what I said. If it's too good to be true, it sort of tends to be. So, yeah, it's I think everyone, human nature is we strive for more, but it's also just being realistic as what's achievable as well. So,
No, that's fair. And look, on that, might just touch on, so, someone comes to you and wants to engage your services. What's your process around helping clients in terms of, obviously, navigating the market, but how do you sort of step them through and help them navigate this process around, buying another property, whether that be for them to live in or obviously on an investment side of things?
Yeah, so great question. And the first thing is refining the brief firstly. So we fill out, as a home buyer or an investor, get out a wish list, and that's where phase 2 is that education and just that, it's that foundational groundwork is really important before we get into the third part, which is the findings. So, but spending time in that education, getting some awareness of just what's sold and what's achievable, and because otherwise people start with that. There's a saying, and the buyers have that champagne taste on a beer budget. So just trying to manage those expectations, I suppose, and just educate, not condition, but just guide and be that trusted advisor. And then you get into the findings. So whether that's the on market and off market, and then the skill set's obviously valuing a property as well. So that's a really important part. And because obviously before you can negotiate, you need to know what it's worth, and you need to understand those supply demand factors and how they marry up as well. But it's a 5-step process we follow, and we just step our clients through those and at their pace, and just making sure that they understand what they're doing and the why, and making sure that they're playing in the pond and a game they can win, so to speak. Like rather than chasing these aspirational suburbs and hoping for a miracle. Otherwise we've got some clients at the moment who've been looking for all year and probably just been in the wrong suburbs, wrong areas, continually missing at auction. That's probably a sign you might be priced out of that, and you might need to go to the Ripple or the bridesmaid suburb, or just shift a few parameters, or buyer's decision quadrant, which is probably a topic for another day. Just shift some fundamentals of the search.
We might change tact a little bit here and shift away from obviously in terms of finding the property and making sure people, as you said, right, have a bit of a realistic expectation in terms of what they're looking for, but also how do they actually navigate that, because it is, as we said, highly emotive. There's typically a fair bit of money involved. And also it's extremely competitive. So you want to make sure that you can navigate them through, and ultimately people just want a positive outcome, and to see what their next step is, whether that be on their personal journey or ultimately on their investment journey. With that in mind, we're going to shift and just touch on interest rates. So, from my side, this is obviously, when I say relevant, but in our space, it's Australia's typically been, we want to call it your interest rate movements. Look, they move a bit up and down depending on different factors. But, we definitely felt that on the back of COVID, with multiple rate rises, we have noticed that people are a bit more keenly aware around what the rate is. Not so much that focusing on it specifically, but they're aware and they're looking to the market as to, how that might impact them, just because there was a fair bit of volatility in terms of rates going from almost record lows to sort of really
lived it ourselves, I think, Matty. You're aware of it. Yeah.
But, what we're seeing is obviously we've been through a period where, and looking to people that are economists in terms of where they see the view, and obviously that's what their day job is, to understand, the different things that which would impact our the interest rates, which the RBA obviously set, taking into consideration all those international but also domestic factors. But from our side, we definitely feel like we've been at the peak of that cycle where that's been tightening. And look, we've seen a couple of rate drops come in the recent months, and it seems to be the consensus that that would continue, whether that we see another one in the back end of 25, but also then through to early 2026 and see what that holds. I think one thing we've noted across the board, and this isn't just an Australian thing, but in the world we are today, there's so many different global factors that are moving, whether that be from supply of energy. There's obviously various wars that broken out, which might have an impact on our local economy. So, something it's worthwhile. They might be trending in one direction, but you want to keep your finger on the pulse in terms of there might be other factors that sit abroad which might impact us on the domestic front.
So thanks for sharing all that, Matty. It's as I always say to my clients, property is a game of finance. So those insights are really important. So it's really good to get that finger on the pulse from yourself. So, but how do these interest rate movements impact a borrower's capacity, and what are the different loan types that people should consider in the current environment that we're seeing interest rate wise?
Perfect. I mean, look, it's a good question with a few, if I want to call it, different avenues around how you can answer it. But all things being equal, typically an interest rate decrease will have a positive impact on someone's borrowing capacity. You would appreciate anyone that comes to us, everyone's a little bit different. Their income, expenses, their family composition, those are all slightly different for different people, and those have a direct link around what their borrowing capacity could be. So from our side, at a base level, it is positive. But what we like to say to our clients is, you need to understand what that means for your personal circumstances. Mm-hmm. In terms of product, what we might touch on is just really two basic ones at this point, which is variable rates and fixed rates. Obviously, if you're getting into a variable rate product, there's some advantages there where should the rates, the interest rate changes and the banks pass those on, you would get the benefit of that drop in the cycle. Likewise, if rates were to increase, typically you would see an increase in payments. Mm-hmm. There's obviously flexibilities around people while people would look at a variable rate loan. But on the flip side, some people want a bit of certainty. They're happy to look at what we call as a fixed rate, whether they fix the entire loan or part of that. And really what that does is you might lock into a rate that's advertised today, whether it be 1 year, 2 year, or 5 year. But ultimately that gives people certainty. What that does mean is you're tied into that rate. And, if rates decrease, you don't necessarily are going to get that upside. And likewise, if we're in a rising rate environment, typically you've protected yourself a bit. We did see on the back of the pandemic, some people locked in at rates, under sort of 2% in 5 years. So we had this extreme rate rise, but some people were sitting pretty and ready then trying to, they took the view on, well, we need to try make sure we've got the funds and start paying that down and adjusting our lifestyle. So when that does end, they're going back onto sort of a 5 or 6%, that they're ready for that. So, it's when I say it's horses for courses, depending on what your scenario is and what you're looking for, a variable rate might be something that's suitable for you, alternatively a fixed rate, but ultimately that comes down to a few factors. And we sort of help step our clients through when we get to that stage around what those products look like.
No, I think you summed it up really well there, Matty. And again, that's why you probably need to have someone like yourself on your side. I think that's why brokers are growing. Is 75 or plus % of people use brokers now, so it makes sense. You don't want to do this yourself. You need that trusted advisor on your side because it's tough to navigate and to know what questions to ask and what to do. So I think just having that expertise is invaluable. So thank you for sharing. And what advice do you have for someone who is feeling overwhelmed by the current landscape interest rate wise and unsure whether to? So I get this question a lot as well. Should I buy now or should I wait? Do you know the touch lot of numbers as well? But yeah.
Well, no, that's a fair point, right? So from our side, what we really like to do is get people to the start line and ultimately, put them in a position where they realistically understand what they can afford, ultimately what they can borrow and what's comfortable for them. So, whether they want to buy now, wait, I think our first step is to say, understand what your personal scenario is. So what deposit do you have available? What funds can you borrow from a lending institution? Also, just because a lender might approve you for a certain loan amount, are you comfortable with that with your lifestyle, and are you comfortable with those repayments? So sometimes people, you might be able to borrow up to $1.5–2 million, which is fantastic. But then when they look at the repayments, they might, there's questions around, what is the impact on my lifestyle?
Can I still have, can I go out to a cafe or whatever it is, have holidays? And there's a lot of, I think, other decisions I imagine you've got to factor into it all.
So from our side, really, is to say, let's make sure we understand your financial position from a borrowing side of things. So taking stock of what that looks like. And putting you in a position where you know what that looks like from a borrowing capacity, but also what you're comfortable borrowing and what your budget will allow. And ultimately, that's done through, we do sort of a comprehensive review of your position and give you those, that opportunity to sort of understand that. And then, you're armed at the start line, you know what you need. And then, from our side, they can go out and start looking, or potentially engage someone like yourself and get a bit of an assistance around finding that property, whether that's for their family to move into, or maybe they're onto their investment journey where they're looking around, they want to buy something to help build their long-term wealth.
No, that sounds great, Matty. I think making that visible is I think that's the key, isn't it? Because some people have their belief system, or or they've had some advice and it's not always good advice. So I think just informed decision making is important, right? So just getting some knowledge and understanding what might be the right next steps for their family. Because yes, there's different ways to skin a cat, and not all advice is equal as well, right? We see that on our side too a lot. So.
That's it. And as you would know, Melbourne property market typically waits for no one. So when you want to start looking, you want to make sure you're prepared, you've got your finances in order, and you're quite clear on what your brief is in order for you to move forward. Because rarely do you get the opportunity to mull over a property for some weeks, because typically by then someone else has seen it, it's a good fit for them, and they've moved. So you want to make sure you're organized and you're clear in terms of what you're after. What I might do is just as we sort of close out this part of the segment, just to maybe, we've touched on a few different things, talking through underquoting and obviously rates and what the market looks like and being ready. But what would be the one or two pieces of advice you would look to give someone, typically a buyer, they're entering in the market? What would you be saying to them as in terms of how they should proceed?
I think before you jump on the buy side of realestate.com, jump on the sold side, right? I think that's the key thing. I always talk to clients, because I think it's amazing how many times people don't know exactly what their money can get them. They're looking on the wrong side of the fence, right? And so they get seduced and they spend 3 or 4 months in the wrong sandpit. So I think that's probably my first bit of advice. Make sure you're getting the facts, and I think facts is important. So sold or some evidence, is important. So you can make a more informed choice for what your money and the suburbs that are suitable to you as well. So, and if you don't have the time, obviously reach out, get some help or get some guidance. But most importantly, if you've got that at your fingertips, just start, on the facts. Yeah.
Perfect. Only other thing I would add to that is, make sure that you've got a clear and realistic budget from a financing perspective.
Yeah, don't make it up yourself. I think that's yeah.
Make sure you know what that looks like. That'll help set your expectations. And as Maddie's just pointed out, feed into in terms of what property you might be looking at. Our next guest will be none other than Sangram Rana, who is a financial advisor at Build My Wealth. He'll be sharing his expert insights into how working professionals and families can set themselves up for financial success. If you'd like to keep receiving property insights and golden nuggets from our guests, please do follow and subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss out when our next podcast is released, and we'll be looking to do an episode every fortnight. So please do us a favor, like and follow. And until next time, thanks for joining us on the Property and Coffee podcast.
Thanks for listening.